Welcome. Today we're diving into something pretty wild. What if the words we use every single day aren't just labels? What if they're actually shaping our reality? We're about to unpack an ancient idea that might just change how you speak, how you see the world, and maybe even how you connect with other people. I mean, really think about it for a second. When you say a word, are you just pointing at a thing? Or is there something more going on? Maybe something a little deeper? That's the big question we're getting into, and trust me, the answer is probably not what you're expecting. So to get to that answer, we've got to go back, way back. We're going to dig into this really cool concept from the ancient Pali language, from the earliest Buddhist texts. And the word we're looking for is Nirutti. Now, this isn't just some old vocabulary word. No, it's a whole different way of thinking about what a word even is. Okay, so section 1. To really get this, we have to start with how we usually think about words, right? We tend to see them as these simple, static labels for things. But what we're going to see is that for ancient thinkers, language was, it was alive, a living, breathing process. You know what I mean? Our go-to, our default setting, is to think of language as just a big collection of labels. The word cup points to the cup on your desk. Tree points to the tree outside. It's super simple, a one-to-one thing. It's clean, it's logical, but what if it's missing something? Yeah, what if a word isn't just a pointer? What if it's a key? A key that doesn't just name something, but actually unlocks a deeper way of seeing it. That is the big shift we're about to make right now. All right, section 2. Now, to really get our heads around this, we're going to use a special method. Think of it like linguistic archaeology. We're going to dig down through the layers of meaning to get to the good stuff. So here's our game plan. It's a 3-step process. First, we'll put on our modern translator hat and get the simple dictionary definition. Then we'll switch gears and become an ancient linguist, digging deep into the word's roots to find its original meaning. And finally, we'll become the visual storyteller to make this whole abstract idea really clear and tangible. All right, time for section 3. Let's actually put this method to the test. We're going to look at a real example from an ancient text, specifically from the Aranavavabhanga Sutta. Okay, so the phrase we're going to zoom in on is Janapada Nirutti. This is the term at the very heart of the text, and it's the perfect test case for our little 3-step method. So let's start with lens number 1, the modern translator. If you look this up, you get a pretty simple answer. Janapadana Nirutti usually gets translated as regional dialect or maybe local expression. And look, that's not wrong. It's accurate, it makes sense, but it's just the surface level. It's only the first layer. And the text gives this great example to explain it. It says, hey, in different areas, people have different words for the exact same thing. In this case, a simple bowl. So in one place, they call it a pati, but somewhere else, it's a patan or a vitan, and on and on. This list of names seems to perfectly back up that regional dialect translation. So case closed, right? Well, not so fast. This is where things get really, really cool. It's time to switch to our second lens, the ancient linguist. We're not just going to look at the phrase anymore. We're going to look at the core idea inside the phrase. So you see, we have 2 totally different ways to look at this. On one hand, you've got regional dialect. It's just a static label from a certain place. But then look at the other translation, embodied expression. Whoa, that's a much more dynamic idea, isn't it? It's not just a different name. It's about how an entire culture expresses or sounds out the whole idea of what a bowl is. And to get why that is, we have to break down the word Nirutti. Okay, so it's made of 2 parts. You've got ni, which means something like down or into. And then you have rutti, which means to sound out or even to roar. So Nirutti isn't a thing, a static label. It's an action. It's the very act of sounding out a concept, bringing it into the world. It's totally dynamic. It's alive. All right, section 4. So you might be thinking, okay, dialect, expression, what's the big deal? Why does this even matter? Well, it matters a lot. Because the text tells us that how we relate to our words has huge, real-world consequences. You see, the whole story about the bowl isn't just a fun little language lesson. It's actually a warning. The text says the real problem starts when someone digs in their heels and says, my word for bowl, pati, is the only right word. And all you other people, you're just wrong. And this is the absolute key. The text draws a straight line from being rigid about language to actual, real-world suffering. It basically says that when you stubbornly cling to your way of saying things, it leads to arguments and conflict. But when you get that they're all just different ways of sounding out the same reality, well, that's where you find peace and harmony. Which brings us to our final section. This is where it all comes together. This ancient idea isn't just about old grammar rules. It's about how we can use language in a way that actually frees us and the people around us. So here it is, the core insight. The problem was never the different words for bowl. Of course not. The problem is our attachment to our own word. It's that feeling that our label is the only real truth. Language isn't the trap. The trap is how rigidly we hold on to it. But when you can start to see your words and other people's words not as these rigid, absolute truths, but as flexible, different expressions, man, that changes everything. Suddenly, you have room to actually listen, to understand, and to sidestep all those pointless arguments that happen just because we're talking past each other. And that leaves us with one last question, and this one's for you to think about. In your own life, at work, with your family, with your friends, what are the words or the definitions that you're clinging to, thinking they're the only truth? And what do you think might happen if you let that go just for a second and saw them as just one of many ways to sound things out?